Good morning, Boker Tov. We're learning today the weekly Torah portion of Parshat Teitzei, and this is Chassidus, which means the soul of Torah. It's one thing to read Torah on a superficial level, but when you learn Chassidus, you're exposed to Torah on a deeper soul level. That's what it's about. So Chassidus exposes to us the soul of Torah. Just like it's nice to be in contact and in sync with your body. But if you're not in sync with your soul, you're going to be depressed, miserable, angry, underlying trauma issues. You're just not going to find peace if you're not at peace with your soul. Even though you can't see or touch or feel your soul. Well, you can feel it, but you don't taste it. You can't sense it like the senses that sense the body. Nevertheless, it is vital. It's the software that powers the phone, that powers the computer. Without it, you're really lost. So that's what we're doing today, the Hasidis on the weekly Torah portion. Good morning to you, Elaine and Keith. We missed you today. Terry from Atlanta and Corey, good morning to you as well. Let's go straight into it. Today's topic we're going to learn about is the very, very end of this week's Torah portion, Parshat Teitzei, which is about the mitzvah of destroying Amalek. You know Amalek is, Barty?
Evil nation.
Amalek is a nation. Yeah, they're basically the Gaza, the people that lived in Gaza. The Gazans. They were the Amalekites. You know, they were always troublesome people. And the Torah instructs us pretty gruesome to just wipe them out. Wipe them out, to destroy them. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to be learning a talk, a Sikha of the Rebbe. I'm going to be doing a simultaneous translation from the original text. Let's see how this goes. We could see if we could serialize this into a weekly Torah class. Okay. So just a quick context is that the Torah commands us two of the 613 commandments. One is a positive mitzvah to wipe out and destroy the nation of Amalek, men, women, and children. And there's a prohibition of never forgetting what Amalek did for us, how they cooled our ardor on the way out of Egypt. In fact, this idea is something which we actually say every single morning at the end of our morning service in what we call the 6 remembrances. If you happen to have a blue sitter in front of you, you'll notice it on page 84, bottom of page 84, where we have the 6 remembrances that you're supposed to recite daily. And one of them is like this: remember what Amalek did to you on the way as you came out of Egypt. How he met you on the way and cut down all the weak who straggled behind you when you were weary and exhausted, and he did not fear God. Therefore, when the Lord your God will relieve you of all your enemies around you in the land which the Lord your God gives you as a hereditary portion, you shall blot out the memory of Amalek from under the heaven. Do not forget. I mean, that's pretty intense of a directive, telling us really we can't have any negotiations with these guys. This is just a total destruction, which sounds pretty aggressive in our civilized times. But what we're going to learn today is the spiritual component of this mitzvah, what it really means, because we're about to learn that we can't really fulfill this mitzvah anymore. Since the Assyrians, Assyrians, 2,800 years ago, what they did was, before the Romans destroyed our second temple 2,000 years ago, and before the Babylonians destroyed our first temple 2,400 years ago, the Assyrians showed up 2,800 years ago, and they exiled the 10 lost tribes, and they were almost successful in wiping out the 2.5 remaining tribes, the tribes of Judah, Benjamin, and parts of Levi. They almost succeeded, and only due to a miracle, which I will show you when I take you to Israel, to Jerusalem, the remnants of the Broad Wall, only due to a miracle that happened on Passover Eve, under the auspices of the king of that time, King Chizkiyahu, and his awesome bitachon, his trust in God, where they wiped out with the mysterious plague, and they were unable to finish their intent. But what these Assyrians would do, they would conquer nations and they would mix them up. They would conquer the French and move the French to live in Greece. Then they conquer the Greeks and move them to Russia. Then they conquered the Russians and moved them to Recife in Brazil. What they did is that they moved everybody around. So there was no more sense of patriotism, no more sense of nationalism, and far less likely chance of rebellion, because people rebel when they feel connected to the land, not when they are transplants. So ever since Sancheriv mixed up the residents of the world, we don't know anymore who really is an Amalekite or of Amalekite descent. And that's why the mitzvah doesn't necessarily apply anymore, at least on a physical sense. It's something which the Jewish king will fulfill. It's something which Hashem will fulfill. But what we need to fulfill, does that mean the mitzvah is canceled out? No. That's what Hasidus teaches us. When we read this Shabbos, what does it mean? It means that the spiritual component to this mitzvah, there's an Amalek within us that we need to wipe out. And that's the big question. But I want to point out just importantly, in the 6 remembrances, which we read, and this is a direct quote from the 6th Torah portion. I'm going to read it again slowly. It's a direct quote from the 6th Torah portion. Remember what Amalek did to you on the way as you came out of Egypt? How he met you on the way. Now, the word met you on the way can also read how he made you cold on the way. What the Amalekites would do is that they would, the Jews were surrounded by the clouds of glory. As they traveled through the desert, they would protect it. But when anybody sinned, they were kicked out of the cloud of glory. The lepers or something like that, they were thrown out of the cloud of glory. And those were the ones that Amalek would go after, the stragglers. And they would terrify the nation, right? So he made you cold. Like what does it mean? He extinguished your passion. What does that mean, right? And cut down all the weak who straggled behind you when you were weary and exhausted and you did not fear God. Therefore, when the Lord your God will relieve you of all your enemies around you in the land which the Lord your God gives you as a hereditary portion, you shall blot out the memory of Amalek from under the heaven. Do not forget. That's the 6th Torah portion. But let's talk about this a moment. Yeah, we get in there in a moment. But just on a more basic level, what Amalek did was when the Jews came out of Egypt, they were indefatigable. The what do they call it? The deterrence factor was as high as it's ever been. Nobody was willing to attack the Jewish people because they were terrified. We just crippled the Egyptian superpower. Who was willing to attack the Jews? The Medrash gives us an analogy of a boiling hot bath. Everybody sees the boiling hot bath, and everybody's afraid of going in. Comes one Meshuggah, and he jumps in, and he burns himself, 3rd degree burns all over his body. But what happens? Once he jumped in, he cools it down. He also cools down our fear. So Amalek also was the first one to attack us when we were strongest. We just came out of Egypt. Everybody's afraid of us. Nobody wanted to touch the Jews. When Amalek comes and attacks us, even though he gets 3rd degree burns, he got wiped out badly. Nevertheless, the deterrence factor was severely mitigated. That's what they do in Israel now. What do they call them? NSAs or something? Non-state parties. Hezbollah, Hamas. No, not, I'm talking about, it used to be fight wars against the country, but now what they do now, the Arabs, is that they fight Israel, not from a country. They stand behind women and children, right? So you have guerrilla cowards who stand behind women and children, behind schools and hospitals, and they fire missiles, right? So what happens is that even though they lose badly, what they do is that they mitigate the deterrence factor. Because you see, you can attack them. And that emboldens others to do the same, right? So this is Amalek, right? Let's take a look at this idea in the words of the Rebbe. So there are different opinions about the reading of the portion of Zachor, of remember, in the 6th Torah portion, that it is a biblical commandment to hear the reading of this parsha. In fact, when is it a biblical commandment to read this? We read it on the Shabbos before Purim. Every year, Shabbos before Purim, it's called Shabbos Parshat Zachor, the portion of remembrance. We have to read this portion. But we also read it again this Shabbos before Rosh Hashanah. Why? Because it's a biblical commandment, positive commandment to remember what Amalek did to us. Besides the fact that it's a biblical positive commandment, it's also a passive prohibition, not to forget. And this is one of the reasons for the opinion that even women are obligated in listening, in remembering the mitzvah of Amalek. Remember, women are not obligated in all the commandments. Anything which is associated with time, they're exempt from. So this would be a mitzvah that women are also obligated in. Why? Because they are obligated in the passive prohibition of not forgetting. Therefore, they also, if they are commanded not to forget the Amalek, then they're also commanded to remember to wipe them out. From this, we understand how important it is to remember this week's Torah portion, how everybody's obligated in it. Now, even though on a physical level, on a practical level, it's very difficult to employ this commandment of wiping out the nation of Amalek. I mean, by the way, I know it sounds so archaic and primitive to commit genocide, but think about it for a moment. What did the Americans do when they came here? What did they do to the American Indians? They wiped them out. What happens if they didn't? What would have happened? If they would have been so nice to them and said, "Oh no, you guys that live, stay here," what would have happened?
A lot of intermarriage and a lot of
War, and like Palestinian situation, where they claim this is their land, right? That kind of stuff.
well, this is the Indian land. I mean, this for sure is the Indian land.
Right. So you'd have problematic situations. The Torah warns us: you let these nations live, they will be thorns in your sides. They will be thorns in your eyes. So it's interesting, that sometimes you do have, the Torah says, get out of here, get out of this land. And if you stay, you're going to kill you. You know what I mean? But when it comes to Amalek, the Torah's got a very strong focus on wiping this nation out. And it's something which we really have to understand. So let's get into it. Maybe when we understand the spiritual component of Amalek, it's going to start making sense. Okay? So so even though you can't fulfill this mitzvah on a practical level today, you're not going to go out and do ethnic cleansing on DNA testing and go test people, see if they descended from Amalek and wipe them out. There are those opinions that say that this mitzvah applies only to a Jewish king. Okay. Obviously, when a Jewish king is a monarch in the land, and that he has to assemble an army to wipe out the nation of Amalek. But even according to the opinions that say that it's a mitzvah upon every single Jew, it's pretty clear that it's not possible to fulfill this mitzvah on a practical level for two reasons. Number one, because it's only applicable when the Jews are dominant in the land and we're not. Two, it's pretty clear that that it's only when you're able to identify who the nation of Amalek is. But today, when we had Sancheriv, the king of Assyria 2,800 years ago, who mixed up the residents of the land, we don't know who anybody is anymore. And the rule is that when you find an individual, you assume that the individual comes from the majority. The majority of nations are not Amalekites. Amalek is only 1 out of 70 nations. So therefore, you assume that any individual is not from Amalek. He comes from the majority. I see that Corey's asking a question. Yes, we do read about Amalek before Purim. I mentioned that earlier because Haman was an Agagite, which was Amalek. Absolutely. Haman was a direct descendant of Amalek. Correct. SR, long time no see. Boker Tov. Now, only when Mashiach will come, when then the hand of Israel will be dominant in the land of Israel. And we also will be able to verify authenticity of genetic origin. Mashiach will be able to look at us and tell you you're a Kohen, you're a Levi, you're an Israelite, you're not an Israelite. He'll be able to identify who's who. He'll also be able to identify who comes from the nation of Amalek. Then will the King Mashiach be able to wipe out the nation of Amalek as the Torah commands us. However, that's on a practical level, on a physical plane, but on a spiritual plane, there is the service, the mitzvah of wiping out Amalek, which applies even today, that all Jews are commanded to remember to the act of Amalek. Even women who do not normally go out to war are also obligated to remember what Amalek did to us. And this mitzvah of remembering the act of Amalek is not only a one-time thing, it's something which we have to, or something which you do once a year, but it's something which we have to remember every single day. I just showed you, these are the 6 remembrances. You read them every day after the morning service, right? Which this is a teaching how important it is, how relevant it is for us to remember the act of Amalek on a spiritual plane, at the very least, in our divine service always. So what does it mean to remember what Amalek did? Let's try to figure out and understand what Amalek did and how we have to deal with them. So you remember how I said before that Amalek made us cold? What this refers to on a Hasidic interpretation is the cooling of your passion in your divine service. Amalek represents the evil inclination that tries to calm you down. You come home from shul one day and you tell your wife, "Oh my God, I just learned the most amazing inspirational Torah class." And then someone tells you, don't get excited. The rabbi is just interested in your money. Or religion is a sham. You know what I mean? People will come up with these ideas, right? And then what happens? Cools you down. And that is Amalek. Here you are, you just got back from Israel, you heard an inspiring Torah message, you're trying to daven with passion, and what happens? You find that within you there's an Amalek that's trying to cool you down, that's trying to make you think about other things. That is the nation of Amalek. It is the spiritual fire extinguisher within you. Could be a person in your life. There are people that will always try to throw a bucket of cold water on whatever you do. You know people like that, right? We all know people like this. That is Amalek. That doesn't mean you have to kill that person. It means you have to just be cognizant of what they're doing and not allow them to cool your ardor. So, in the Rebbe's words, this concept of Amalek in spirituality is that he colded you on the way. He colded you. He chilled you on the way. There you go. Chilled you out. Chilled you out. What does this mean? He made you cold. As the Medrash interprets that, it means that he made you cold in the way of Torah mitzvahs. You're all excited. You just received the Torah Mount Sinai. You can't wait to serve God, to make this world a home for God. You can't wait to engage in every physical object and infuse it with divine consciousness and awareness, to make it a conduit, to make it a part of Hashem's world. And comes someone and says, what are you getting so excited about? Right? You're crazy. The rabbi brainwashed you. It's all Baba Mises. You know people like this, right? And you look at them, by the way. What do you see? Their lives are not exactly a bed full of roses, right? Miserable. Their lives are typically miserable. They're just sad, and nothing helps a bad mood like spreading it. You know that? Nothing helps a bad mood like spreading it. It's amazing, toxic. So, on the other hand, or opposed to this coldness of Amalek, there has to be a war waged every single day. It's not enough that yesterday you were warmed up to Torah mitzvahs and specifically to the passion of prayer. Today you have to wage war again against the coldness of Amalek. Specifically, the Rebbe talks about the importance of passion in your davening. You know, we as a community have grown. You know, we established Chabad upon which Garden 17 years ago, and 16 years ago. We're in our 17th year. Amazing, eh? We started this community from nothing. I mean, it was, to think that we'd have a daily minyan, a daily Torah study is unthinkable. It was hard to imagine. But now, we're davening. The question is, what kind of davening do you have? And I'd like to really shift gears now. I'd like to encourage you to, and our listeners here, to really deep dive your davening. In the words of Robert Berger, I love how he says that, to deep dive. When you daven, it's not just a superficial reading. You're not just reading, you're talking. Good morning, Ed Hawker. I didn't see you here. You're not reading. It's not a recital. Davening is a conversation. And you need to be cognizant of who it is that you're talking to, not just what it is that you're reading. Davening is not a narrative. It's a conversation. And when you do that, you get excited, you get passionate, you get into it. That's why men wear a talus over their heads. And you're supposed to really put your talus way over. You see this, Marty, like this, like way over. You put your talus when you want to zoom in and tune out of the world and tune into your davening. But I guess women are far less distracted, I guess. I don't know. But clearly. They can focus. Women can focus better than men. But I find my wife, she can be doing 16 things at the same time and still be talking to me. But me, I could never do that. I could never do that. So a deep dive in your davening is to get emotional in your davening. But this is what we learned in Tanya. You're not supposed to just, okay, check in, check out, what's next? You're supposed to actually have an emotional experience. Like, when was the last time you had an emotional conversation with your spouse? Think about that for a moment. When was the last time you had like a real deep emotional conversation with your spouse? It's really fulfilling. It's invigorating. It's beautiful. Look deep into each other's eyes and really connect on an emotional level. That is what davening is. If you're just davening like, okay, well, what was that? I mean, I wouldn't say it's nothing, but it's superficial. Imagine somebody came over to you and he said, and then you moved on. The Frierdiker Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak Schneerson, he's like, seriously, he gives an example. He's like, imagine you walk into the king and you like throw at him, a bunch of paragraphs. You like vomit a bunch of paragraphs at him and then you walk out. You'll be hanged. You got to talk like a mensch. You got to talk like a mensch, right? Now, Corey says, can you please capitalize Please? Slow down when you say Asher et Musaf because I have to zip through it without kavanah. Now, Corey, let me tell you this. I run a fine line between keeping the crowd and being able to daven. So now here's what I want to tell you to do. You'll notice that we do a lot of like public reading. Like we'll do the Mishaberach, the Avarachim in English, right? For example, when we do the Avarachim in English, that's not for you. That's for the people that can't read Hebrew. But the people that can, they go ahead and they just keep on moving. You understand what I'm saying? So what you're supposed to do is you start your Kumpurkan, and then you go straight into Avarachim. You don't wait for the guy to do it in English. That is more like a diversion for the people that don't really know what's flying. So we're trying to keep them busy. But for the people that do, keep on going. Don't wait for them to finish it in English so that you can start the ashtray, so you can zip through it. The reason why it's so quick is because I'm saying it while he's doing it in English. I hope you understand what I'm saying. Okay, let's keep on going. So every day, even before we go out to deal with the matters of the world, we have to warm ourselves up with war against Amalek. This is a daily battle, my friends. Where's the battle set? During davening. And the victory is the passion during davening, the heartfelt emotion. It's through this passion in davening that he will be able to win the war against Amalek. Even later when he deals with matters of this world. If during davening you beat Amalek, then later in the day when you're dealing with business, then you'll be able to overcome Amalek as well. You'll be able to keep and stay inspired. Right? And this is the preparation for the wiping out of the nation of Amalek on a physical plane as well, which will happen through Mashiach. Mashiach will take care of that. He'll deal with the bad guys, right? Mashiach will deal with the bad guys, but how do we ensure that Mashiach will wipe out Amalek on a physical plane? When we do so on a spiritual plane, when we do our part, then Mashiach will do his part. Does that make sense to you? Let's get now a little more personal. This is what the Rebbe does, a little more personal. What does this mean, says the Rebbe? That Amalek is a war that is waged in every single generation and in every single day of the year. Don't read this Shabbos like some sort of an ancient nation that I've never heard of, that we have to remember to hate them. I mean, that's not what it's talking about. It's talking about the Amalek inside of you. You have an Amalek. It's called your Yetzer Hara, your evil inclination. And you got to make sure to beat the daylights out of your evil inclination, because if you don't, he's going to eat you up alive, chew you into little pieces, and spit you out. That's what your evil inclination is going to do to you. It's going to beat the living daylights out of you. You cannot suffice with this, that you had a very frum Zeta. It's not enough that you had a frum Zeta, or that your tata had a nice long beard, or maybe that you once upon a time went to yeshiva many years ago. That's not enough. So you beat Amalek then? Lovely. It's an ongoing battle against the coldness of Amalek. Because remember, who does Amalek fight against? The weak and the stragglers amongst you. So the minute that you lose your passion, the minute that you're a little off guard, that's when Amalek dives into you. And he trails the nation to try to capture the weak and the vulnerable. How do you stay inspired, by the way? Corey, do you have any ideas? How to stay inspired? Anybody got ideas? How can you stay inspired?
Part of it is being with a minion.
Oh, that's a good one, Marty. Part of it is being with a minion, because when you're on your own, it's like a tree growing alone. A tree grows crooked. But when it's amongst other trees, it goes straight. When you're with a minion, there's something very, very powerful with it. Besides the spiritual component of being with a minion, that there's a spiritual energy which is far greater than the sum of its parts. On a very, very basic level, when you're surrounded by other people that are also davening, it is motivating, keeps you in check. Oh, got some good comments here. So Elaine says, like perpetual creation. Yes, like God has to create every day. You have to create your inspiration every day. But Corey says she studies and davens every day. Specifically, what are you studying? Keep learning, says Terry. Keep learning and sharing. So what is it? Is there a specific? I agree with you. A cold train needs coal all the time, right? The engine of the airplane is constantly burning fuel, right? It's the cost of doing business. It's burn rate, I think they call it. Comments coming in nicely. Corey says she learns chitas. That's nice. That's very nice. I like that a lot. Chitas is daily chumash Tehillim and Tanya. Now that's a very spiritual connection to the Rebbe, by the way. Have to say strong. The trucker. Sorry, I'm late, but good morning nonetheless. Of course, good morning. SR says doing shuva. Teshuva. That's nice. I like that too. But I'm going to be very, very specific with you guys. What you need to learn is Hasidis. You know, it's very nice to learn Torah. It's very, very nice to learn Torah. But Hasidis is going to set your soul on fire. When you learn Tanya, when you learn this kind of stuff, which is, you know, the Hasidis and the weekly Torah portion, when you learn stuff like V'yadaita Maskava, when you learn things that are Hasidis, they are the fire of Torah. And the fire of Torah will set the fire within your soul alight. So yes, I just don't disagree with anything that anybody said. The minyan that Marty said, and the shuva that SR said, and the learning that Corey and Terry said. True. But when you learn Hasidis, and that's why I really want to emphasize more Hasidis now this year. I really want to get more into Hasidis. I know Marty, you've been pushing me to do that. Definitely want to do more Hasidis. And I'm thrilled that I was able to publish the V'yadaita Maskava, which now is available in hardcover. It's going to be available this Shabbos for the Bar Mitzvah. But when you learn Hasidis, that's what sets your soul on fire. Okay. By the way, Corey, the Chayenu is amazing and includes Hasidus, also classes in the morning, and my teaching inspires me. That's beautiful when you teach others, yes. But I want you to know the Chayenu, starting right after the high holidays, is going to be carrying my book, V'yadaita Maskva. They're going to be doing the weekly Hasidus that they're going to carry there, Corey, is going to be my book that started right here on youtube.com/Jewish Gardens. Right, that's what we learned together as a community. Terry, you're right behind this project, right? So it's in the Chayenu, the weekly subscription Torah study. If you haven't done so already, you should really subscribe to Chayenu, which is CHAYENU.com, I think, or maybe .org. You can get the first 3 months free, delivered to your inbox, to your mailbox. Thank you, Corey. Missed a comment from Have to Stay Strong. Rabbi, do you have a playlist of garments of the soul? My rabbi said to start with this in Hasidus. Ooh. I didn't know you had a rabbi. It's awesome. Have to stay strong. Yes, Garments of the Soul. I do have a playlist. I did teach it. If you go to youtube.com/Jewish Gardens. Actually, we are going to be setting up a website very, very soon on our website, a page with all the Torah classes really nicely organized. Very, very nicely organized. But that's coming up in just a few days. So bear with us. But have to stay strong. The link would be go to youtube.com/Jewish Gardens and you click on the top of the page where it says playlists, and you'll see Garments of the Soul is one of those playlists. It's about 30 playlists. And that would include all the classes on Garments of the Soul, which is an amazing, amazing Hasidus course. I love it. Rabbi Pinney in Kingston, Pennsylvania. Love it. Wow. That is awesome. I love it. Good. So let me just wrap this up here and say this is how we keep our souls on fire. Hasidus is our weapon. You can't just fight against Amalek. This guy's been doing fighting against us for 4,000 years. You can't just wake up and decide with your cup of coffee that you're going to beat him. You need real powerful tools that come before Amalek, and that is the teachings of Hasidus. Remember, Moses received the Torah Mount Sinai even before the Amalekites attacked us. When we received the Torah Mount Sinai, this is the secrets of Torah Hasidus. The Rebbe's final words is, we have to keep on fighting this battle by teaching, learning Hasidus. And like Corey says, teaching Hasidus. When you teach it, it's even more ingrained within you. I have to tell you, when I teach you, I'm even more on fire than if I learned it just by myself, right? So it's very powerful. And imagine, Marty, you teach it to someone else, right? How cool is that? So until we have an impact with the coming of the Mashiach, where our actions, as below, so above, as we initiate the mitzvah from below, Hashem completes the mitzvah from above. We do our part, Hashem completes it. So we wipe out Amalek on a personal plane. If you bring Mashiach into your little world, your heart and soul, then Hashem brings Mashiach to the whole world. You wipe out Amalek within you, that Hashem wipes out Amalek in the entire world. As it says in the verse, if you look closely, it says, Macho emche et zecher Amalek. Wipe out, I will wipe out. You wipe out, I will wipe out. Then the memory of Amalek will happen speedily in our day. So the Rebbe is pointing out that what this really means is it seems like a typo almost in the Torah. It says, it's like a double expression. You wipe out, I wipe out the nation of Amalek. No, it's not in this week's portion. Where does it come from? It comes from the other place. It's probably from Exodus. It says, you wipe out, and then I will wipe out. We have to do our part, the spiritual. Exactly. We have to do our part to wipe out the net in the memory of Amalek, and then Hashem will do his part. Closing comments. Corey says, Mazel Tov, thank you. Have to stay strong. Thank you, Corey. Absolutely. Very inspiring class. Thank you so much. Guys, I do think we're going to try to make this into a weekly Torah class, the Chassidus, the Rebbe's Chassidus on the weekly Torah portion. So stay tuned. Maybe we'll stick to Wednesdays. We'll see what happens. All right, guys. Thank you so much. Have a great day, and shalom.